Hi there and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about Portugal's all new and rebranded Golden Visa. You may have thought that the Golden Visa was a thing of the past, but no, it's back. Alright, so this new Golden Visa is a lot different from the previous incarnation. Basically, the last one, for those members of the audience that remember, involved investments of some kind. You basically had to put like 350,000 euros in some kind of Portuguese investment fund, or put 350,000 euros in rural property, or put 500,000 euros in an urban property somewhere like Lisbon. That was the way that people obtained the Golden Visa, but that was nixed actually by the socialist government, and it has now been firmly put to bed. So I was a little bit surprised when I read about this new version of the Golden Visa, which is returning to Portugal, because I thought that the subject was just so politically toxic, and so many Portuguese were against it that nobody would possibly ever attempt to revive it. But no, I was wrong. They have. This new version is actually called the Solidarity Golden Visa, and it has a really interesting dynamic to it, because the idea is that an investor can pay around 250,000 euros. The actual figure has not been firmly set by the government, but a donation essentially of 250,000 euros to some kind of fund set up by the government, and in exchange for that they will get their residence permit. It's unclear at the moment the duration of the permit, but I presume it's at least for 5 years, and whether or not that leads to citizenship and how many days they have to actually stay in the country. We don't know any of that information as yet, but it could potentially, like the last Golden Visa where people only had to spend a couple of weeks in the country, qualify people for the acquisition of citizenship. The twist with this Solidarity Golden Visa is it's actually set up in a way that the 250,000 euros generated from each resident permit, which is sold to a rich foreigner coming here, will be channeled into projects which are designed to encourage the welfare and integration of poor immigrants into society. Not Portuguese people, mind, not poor Portuguese people, but immigrants. So what they want to do is they want to use this money to help the funding for things like reception centres, and I had a previous video about reception centres for migrants that the government planned to establish in both Lisbon and Porto. Also things like programmes to assist immigration, probably language programmes and stuff like that, and housing, low-cost housing for immigrants, accommodation for them basically, so that they don't have to pay these crazy prices that we see in Portugal, and the problem of maybe migrant homelessness and things like that, overcrowding, is eased a little bit. Okay, fine, all well and good on the surface. It seems like a noble endeavour. But when you consider the fact that there are many Portuguese people who are in financial difficulty and need help with their housing, is it really the right step and the right signal for the government to be sending to say, look, we're going to take this money from rich immigrants into Portugal and we're just going to give it directly to poor immigrants? I think that that's really not a very good idea, because fundamentally if the immigrants into Portugal are so poor that they require the assistance of the state and they require like state-sponsored accommodation, etc., then what the hell are they doing here in the first place? Why is it that Portugal is importing people who are just basically a burden on the rest of society? It's really a mystifying thing for me why any country would want to do that. If Portugal wants to sell visas, if they want to sell residence permits to wealthy foreigners, I think as long as the foreigners have been thoroughly vetted, and as long as it only leads to citizenship if that person actually fulfills the qualifications for getting citizenship, meaning that they spend at least 6 months of the year in country per year and they become a tax resident here, then I don't have a fundamental objection to golden visas or golden residence permits or anything like that. Of course, if the checks aren't that good, if we're letting criminals in or anything like that, then it's not a good idea. But once we talk about, raising money from these golden visa sales and channeling that directly into helping other kinds of immigrants who probably shouldn't be here in the first place, I think that it enters into the realm of being a bit ludicrous, to be honest. The idea behind it is that if you help the immigrants with their accommodation, then it will filter through into the housing market generally, and there'll be less pressure on the housing market, so there'll be more properties available for local Portuguese, and prices will fall, things will be more comfortable. It seems like a very indirect and convoluted way of doing things. If you really wanted to help the local Portuguese population, have easier access to housing, why not use the money to simply construct low-cost housing for Portuguese people, for Portuguese low-income earners, rather than migrant accommodation centres or migrant housing? It just doesn't make any sense to me. I think that the government really needs to get its priorities straight and think about the people who vote for it and the people who put it into power with a mandate. Those are the people who deserve first call on the government resources, not some people from overseas who have come here under I don't know what kind of circumstances, but they're obviously too poor to be able to support themselves in a comfortable manner, and consequently they have to rely on the state, and they create a burden on the state and on the social security system. It's just senseless. Just to close, looking at this residence permit, I don't think it's going to be immensely successful. The golden visa in Portugal previously was much more successful because it was tied to a real asset which had the potential to appreciate in value. So although there were some rather nasty fees involved in the previous incarnation of the Portuguese golden visa project, investors had the very real potential to basically not lose money out of it, or come at least very close to break even. Some people probably even made a profit with their properties. But with this one, where you come down to just a donation of €250,000 just for a residence permit, which may or may not lead to citizenship and may or may not require you to become a tax resident, I don't think the uptake on that is going to be fantastic. I really don't, because there are many, many comparable programs at a lower cost around the world. I don't think that people are just going to be flocking to Portugal to take advantage of a residence permit that basically costs €250,000. It would be much, much cheaper for someone to take the time to come here as a student, for example, enroll in a higher education institute, or open up a business and get some kind of investor visa for that. It would be cheaper by far to do that than to simply fork over €250,000 for a residence permit. I honestly don't know who this will appeal to, but I think it's only a very small segment of the foreign population would like to take the government up on this offer. So it may be something of a nothing burger because the program itself might founder. In my view, you have to be a pretty lazy person to go with this option over other options which require maybe a little bit more work but will save you a lot of money. And people with that amount of money to just throw around in a donation tend not to be super lazy, so I don't think that bodes well for the success of this program. Alright, well that'll do it for this video. I hope people found the content interesting and informative, and I will see you soon in the next one.